Adnan dragged his mop bucket down the pristine corridors of the Zephyrian temple station, muttering under his breath about overtime shifts and alien bosses who couldn't tell the difference between deep, clean, and routine maintenance. The towering crystalline walls hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache, but after 3 years working custodial on the most sacred site in the galaxy, he'd grown used to the discomfort. The Zephyrians had hired humans for menial labor precisely because they were considered the most unremarkable species in known space. No psychic abilities, no natural connection to the cosmic energies that flowed through their ancient temples, no risk of accidentally triggering the sacred mechanisms that kept their civilization's greatest secrets locked away, or so they thought. Sector 7 Alpha cleared. Adnan spoke into his comm unit, wringing out his mop in the bucket's built-in centrifuge, moving to the restricted wing. Negative, Adnan, came the crackling voice of Nehal, his supervisor and the only other human on the station. Skip the restricted wing tonight. High Priest Vexathera specifically said, static consumed the line. Adnan tapped his earpiece, but the interference only worsened. The station's energy fluctuations had been acting up all week, probably some cosmic storm passing through the system. He shrugged and continued toward the restricted wing anyway. The floors didn't clean themselves, and he'd learned that Zephyrian priests were more bark than bite when it came to their sacred spaces. The restricted wing felt different tonight. The walls pulsed with a deeper rhythm, and the geometric patterns etched into the crystalline surfaces seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Adnan had always been sensitive to electrical fields, a quirk that had gotten him kicked out of 2 different tech jobs. But this felt like standing inside a giant heartbeat. He pushed through the ornate doorway into the central chamber and stopped dead. The floor was a masterpiece of fractal artistry, inlaid with metals that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could process. Patterns spiraled outward from a central point where something that looked like a control console rose from the crystalline surface. This wasn't just a temple floor. It was clearly some kind of interface. Well, shit, Adnan muttered, then immediately felt guilty for cursing in a sacred space. His grandmother would have boxed his ears. But a job was a job. He'd seen plenty of fancy alien tech over the years, and none of it had ever been damaged by a little soap and water. He dipped his mop and started working on what looked like scuff marks near the chamber's entrance. The moment the wet mop touched the first metallic inlay, the entire chamber exploded with light. Symbols blazed to life across every surface, cycling through colors that had no names in any human language. The console in the center began to hum, and holographic displays materialized in the air around it. Adnan stumbled backward, but it was too late. His mop had already traced a partial pattern across the floor, and the interface was interpreting his cleaning motions as commands. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," he chanted, backing toward the door. But the chamber had sealed itself, responding to what it perceived as an authorized user attempting to activate the system. Through the chaos of light and sound, Adnan heard something that made his blood freeze. His comm unit crackling back to life with Nehal's panicked voice. "Adnan, where are you?" The entire galactic defense network just activated. Every Zephyrian warship that's been in hibernation for the past 1,000 years is powering up simultaneously. The realization hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just a temple, it was a command center. The Zephyrians weren't a peaceful species who had transcended warfare. They were a sleeping military superpower, and their entire fleet had been waiting for someone to accidentally mop the activation sequence into their control system. The holographic displays were showing star charts now, with thousands of red dots spreading across the galaxy like a digital infection. Each dot represented a warship coming online, weapons charging, crews awakening from stasis after centuries of sleep. "Nehal," Adnan shouted into his comm. "I think I just started a war." "What did you do?" "I mopped a floor." There was a pause. "You mopped a floor and started a galactic war?" "Apparently." The console was demanding input now, symbols flashing in sequences that Adnan's human brain couldn't hope to comprehend. But his janitor's instincts kicked in. When you make a mess, you clean it up. He grabbed his mop and started trying to retrace his steps, dragging the wet strands across the patterns in reverse order. More lights flashed. More systems activated. The red dots on the star charts were multiplying exponentially. "Adnan." Nehal's voice had gone deadly calm. "High Priest Vexathara is standing behind me, and she looks like she's about to molt from stress. She says you've just awakened the Eternal Fleet, and now every species in the galaxy thinks the Zephyrians are launching a conquest campaign. Can she tell me how to turn it off? There was muffled conversation in the background. Then Nehal came back on. She says the activation sequence can only be completed or aborted by someone with the spark of creation in their neural patterns. Whatever that means. Adnan stared at the console, then at his mop, then back at the console. I think, he said slowly, it means someone who can improvise. He'd spent his whole life being told he was unremarkable, just another human taking up space in a universe full of more impressive species. But maybe that was exactly what made humans special. They didn't follow ancient protocols or wait for permission. They saw a problem and they solved it, even if their solution was completely insane. Especially if their solution was completely insane. Adnan squared his shoulders, raised his mop like a conductor's baton, and began to dance. He mopped in patterns that had no basis in Zephyrian sacred geometry, guided by nothing but human intuition and the desperate hope that improvisation could succeed where protocol failed. He drew spirals and straight lines, zigzags and loops, turning the command interface into the galaxy's most important work of abstract art. The system fought him at first, trying to interpret his random movements as tactical commands, but gradually something shifted. The red dots on the star charts began to blink amber, then yellow, then green. One by one, the awakening warships were receiving new orders, not to conquer but to return to their ancient slumber. It's working! Nehal's voice crackled through the comm. The fleet is standing down. How did you... I have no idea. Adnan panted, still dancing with his mop as the last few systems powered down. But I think I just figured out what makes humans special. What's that? He grinned as the chamber's lights faded back to their normal soft glow, the crisis averted by nothing more than a janitor's willingness to improvise. We're the only species crazy enough to solve a galactic crisis with a mop and some creative thinking. The door unsealed with a soft chime, and Adnan walked out of the restricted wing like he'd done nothing more eventful than empty a few trash cans. Behind him, the command center returned to its millennium-long sleep, its secret safe once again. Some days, being the galaxy's most unremarkable species had its advantages.